Welcome to From Caving In to Crushing It, the podcast for those who find themselves immersed in adversity and choose to write their story instead of having others write it for them. I'm Drew Durrani, and I'm your host. Edith, so good to see you. Thanks for coming on.
Of course, it's such an honor to be here. How are you?
I'm doing well, doing well. We got a chance to talk last week, which was good. We got to catch up after a while, not being able to talk to each other. So I'm
Mhm.
glad we did that.
Yes, for sure. It's a pleasure.
So I always like to thank the person who introduces me to my guest. And so Melissa Van Oss, if you're paying attention out there, thank you for introducing Edith and me. There was a reason why, and now I know it. And you are very good at judging who should meet who. So thanks, Melissa.
Yeah, thank you.
So why did I ask Edith on, or the Lady E effect? And we are going to get to where that came from because that's going to be a good part of the story. But Edith, I have you on because I often talk about how life, when we're young, people tell us life is linear. It's a straight line. If you do all the right things, you do A plus B plus C, D is going to happen. And it's not malicious teaching. Yet we believe it because we want a straight path in life. That's easier. Ultimately, life is linear until it's not. That external circumstance or circumstances come in our way, and we either see them or we don't. And we either change or we don't. And I firmly believe there's three types of people out there. And for your sake, Edith, three types of women out there. So same goes for men. And we can be any of these three or all of them in the same day, depending on our self-awareness. So there's woman number one who's got so many blind spots. She doesn't see what's in front of her and just lives life the way it's presented to her and goes on her way kind of on autopilot. And then there's woman number two who has a heightened self awareness. She notices all that adversity in front of her, yet she says, I'm the victim. Everybody else is to blame. It's life doing it to me. It is what it is. I can't control anything. I'm just going to live it the way it's being thrown at me. I'm not making any changes. And she ends up on her deathbed with a lot of regrets. And then there's woman number three. That's you. That's the other women and other men. Man number three, the men I have on the show. This is the individual who's got a heightened self awareness. And when adversity hits, they finally say, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. I'm not letting life do it to me anymore. What's in front of me is not a barrier, it's an opportunity. It's life doing it for me. I'm going to take this as a challenge to become a stronger person. I'm going to take it head on and become a lot stronger on the other side. So, for the audience, Edith, think as far back as you need to. Think of that defining moment in life, whether it was the tap on the shoulder, the whisper in the ear, or like I needed the 2x4 upside my head. That allowed me to see a shift that is possible going from wherever woman you were to woman number three. And let us know how that changed you and how you become the person you are personally. And we'll get into what you're doing professionally.
Wonderful question. Thank you so much for asking that. Definitely agree with you. I would love to confirm that I would be a woman number three. I have been blessed to be exposed to a lot of different things in life, good and not so good. To answer specifically your question, something that really stands out to me, in 2005, I was actually 14 years old at the time, very active young woman. I was operating and pretty much performing arts, but ultimately psychology, communication, sports. I was pretty active. So that personal development definitely started at a very young age in all of the different areas I was operating in, and just even working very early in like mental health, special needs, autism waiver space. The significance of this example was on June 4th, 2005, I unexpectedly experienced a shooting. This was very, very powerful. Just the circumstance, of course, there's a story behind that, but it was in a place it shouldn't have been. There was a celebration of a former classmate, and not everybody was coming there with the right intentions of celebrating her. And unfortunately, certain areas and aspects of the event spilled into a very scary and toxic space. And unfortunately, myself and one other person were both heavily wounded. Mine was more severe. The bullet at the time, I did not see the person or anything like that. It was just a lot of things going on, and we were in an outside backyard space of the residence.
Mhm.
And to make a long story short, I was shot through my right arm, and instead of being in and out, the bullet actually entered my body. Thank God it didn't go through my heart, but it fractured my rib cage, and of course, a domino effect of additional injuries. Now, as traumatic as that sounds, it could have been an instant death. It could have been something a lot worse than even the details around the story. But to summarize it, that was something that, although I was 14 years old,
Mhm.
um, I was already very active in general. And that was just like a wake up call, I would say, just the reality of life that, no matter how good or bad of quote unquote a person you may be,
Yeah.
there are things that are outside of your control. You
Mhm.
may not know how to respond to something until it specifically happens to you.
Yeah.
It's easy for all of us to say, hey, I would do that if I was
Mhm.
this. But when
Yeah.
you face it,
Mhm.
it's a totally different ball game. So that taught me the importance of faith, the importance of knowing that there is a God that can be able to give you grace to still live past something as traumatic and very fatal as those type of circumstances may
Right.
be. And it definitely encouraged me, even in that young space, to forgive. A lot of times when we have pain, whether we know the person that may have harmed us or not, forgiveness sets you free. It sets you free from that mental trauma that unfortunately can take place when you do go through traumatic events.
Right. Right.
And it encourages you to not think limited, because sometimes the enemy can kind of get in your mind and have you think all of these horrible thoughts. So I kind of went through that, especially with my age being not so
Mm.
old, right? I was
No.
a young teenage woman in growing per se. And it taught me a lot, forgiveness, faith, understanding that it's a blessing to still be able to be alive and survive a significant situation like that.
Right.
And even tying into the woman that I am now, June 4th of this year will actually make it about 20 years. With the significance of how the bullet entered in me, it broke my rib cage. It caused a lot of different harmful places to my temple, but it was not safe for them to take it out based on what the doctor said. So, by the grace of God, people can go through something similar where they're not here at all, or maybe they're in a wheelchair or different things like that.
Yeah.
It definitely took a lot of faith, courage, encouragement, and definitely the physical aspect of healing from that, where I had to face that a bullet is going to be in my body for the rest of my life, but not in a way where it has to cripple me. So
Right. Right.
definitely answering ultimately the question, it taught me the importance of shifting your mind when you go through something traumatic,
Yeah.
because we think so much about, oh my gosh, like, and just the different branches that come out of just like what could trickle into your mind
Right.
when you
Right.
have a domino effect like that. But um it really teaches you, even when it comes to business, right? The success is not about the money. It's about being able to conquer, a lot of, bumps and roads and things that are designed to be in your way to try to discourage you, I would say. So ultimately, bringing up that example really taught me the importance of having faith,
Yeah.
the importance of your mindset when something traumatic is taking place in your life. Are you going to give up? That person one and two, right? It could have been me that was one or two, or maybe there was a season where I did experience one and two,
Yeah.
but absolutely as person number three, the endurance that even I learned in sports and,
Yeah.
just the personal development aspect when it
Right.
comes to school and activities, it really just teaches you the power of faith and
Yeah.
the power of just really shifting your mind, especially when it comes to like that victim mindset.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
it's really it's dangerous to the mind because it opens up the door to depression, it opens up the door to other things that can lead from depression, anxiety, and the list goes on.
Sure.
And strength really comes from understanding that God has blessed us with the ability to be on his earth. And just in general, when you go through something so traumatic like that, that's not who I am. It happens to be a part of my story.
Right.
It's
That's
really
not.
designed. Yeah, it's a testimony, really. So I share it to encourage others that besides myself, there's trillions of other people in this world that we all go through traumatic situations, whether personally or maybe we witnessed a loved one.
Right.
And your mindset and faith have a lot to do with overcoming those barriers. So that's ultimately what I learned in a kind of summarized aspect, but
Yeah.
faith and understanding your mind is powerful when you know how to use it. I
Yeah.
would say
That's
that.
very true. How long did it take for you to heal physically?
That's a good question. So at the time, I'll say this, the doctors, um, in respect to everyone in the medical field, because I know this is a somewhat of a touchy subject. I respect professionals and, their expertise because I'm not a doctor. That's not my profession. I had a point where I was studying more or less towards that from the therapeutic psychology aspect, but medical practice wasn't particularly what is my purpose.
Sure. Sure.
And ultimately, I was basically told a laundry list of what I would never be able to do again, which I don't believe that
Right.
personally, but I just kind of had open ears
Yeah.
to kind of listen to what they were stating, but it was very negative, to
Sure.
be honest. Yes, a bullet is powerful in the aspect where it's not really designed to be in a human body.
Right.
So understandably, whether it's a man or a woman, that is something that can cause a lot of trauma and other domino effects to the body. So they knew at the time I was, an athlete, but just outside of that, just operated in all types of activities that
Yeah.
actually led into the business that we'll talk about soon. But
Mhm.
in general, the time it took about a year, but even with that, I think with just listening to the doctors versus making a decision. And I thank God for just having the discernment to make the wise decision to
Yeah.
not accept
Right.
that and accept the limitation that was given to me per
Right.
se from professionals. So all the things that they told me I could not do, I had a sling blade on because I had to, let the healing from my arm take place and things like that, since that's where the bullet entered, and just things that didn't help me heal physically. So when I made the decision that I was not going to listen to what the doctor said and I wasn't going to accept limitation from
Yeah.
anyone,
Right.
which again comes back to mindset, I simply took a broom. I took off the cast that I had. No, my arm was not that strong, but just simple things in the house, like kind of even working with uh children with special needs.
Yeah.
Kind of like when we get injured, you have to reset.
Yeah.
Sometimes your body could be a vegetable, sometimes your body is just not as equipped as maybe it was as at a previous moment. So specifically, things that I used to teach them leverage off of fine and growth motor skills from, tying a button, or excuse me, tying a tie, or buttoning up a button or zipping and things like that.
Mhm.
I had to learn that.
Right.
I had to relearn that. So with a cast, I couldn't be able to do that.
Right.
And just with the things that the doctor was saying to me. So I made a decision to not listen to that aspect and finding growth motor skills around the house. So I remember taking a broom, just started to like sweep, just started to clean and just do things around the house where over time it naturally would build back my strength.
Mhm.
I had to remind myself and be encouraged by family, and shout out to all my family as well,
Yeah.
and loved ones and those that supported me at the time and still do.
Mhm.
I really appreciate that. Um, just even different things when it comes to writing or things that you need that arm strength.
Yeah.
So making sure that I processed to what I was going through because I was still in school. I was
Yeah.
in high school at the time. This happened towards the end of the very end of my freshman year going into sophomore. So
Oh,
that was all also traumatic to
yeah,
come back to school eventually, and people are asking and want to
of
know
course.
things about you. So just like the mental preparation of all of that, in the healing aspect, I decided to heal naturally,
Mhm.
stay away from like medication and things that could have definitely opened up a whole rabbit hole
Yeah,
into additional things that could harm my body. So I made sure to take the natural approach,
sure.
sleeping, getting as much rest as I could, being as hydrated as possible, nourishing my body, which these all connected to the natural healing. And just, even when it came back, one thing that the doctor said outside of all the things I couldn't do, he told me that I would never run again. And at the time I was a track and field athlete. I was a
Yeah,
sprinter to be exact.
sure.
So um, I just didn't accept that. I didn't say anything disrespectful. I let him say whatever he believed he needed to say, but I made the decision before I walked out of that room that I will heal despite anything that was going to be displayed to me in that conversation. And I think the mindset plus the implementations and just doing the opposite from what the doctor did, which, some people understand that, some people may not. That sped up the healing process because to have a bullet in you, that's something that forever could, have an effect. And
Yeah, right.
to a certain extent, that today it does, but it's about learning your body
Yeah.
to because our bodies get older moment by moment, day by day. But with that being a little bit of a lengthy answer, definitely just the nutrition, the sleep, fine and gross motor skills, and just doing opposite than what the doctors told me.
So, at such a young age, you learn not to take for granted the little things in life,
Absolutely.
right? And
Absolutely.
instead of hiding, you wanted to share that with the world, which is why you started helping others who might have lost the ability to do uh, the things we take for granted. So I
Yeah.
commend you on that.
Thank you.
Next question might be a little more challenging. When did you heal emotionally from that?
That's a good question. So, and that question even leads into something that's important as humans to understand. Healing is a process.
Yeah.
You cannot run away from it. The more you do, the more you don't have peace. So, in order to have peace, you have to understand that there's a process
Mhm.
to your healing where you need to process the trauma that happened to you.
Right.
You don't have to understand everything, but the process of understanding, there may be some moments where there might be some traumatic thoughts kind of lingering.
Right.
Understanding that's not your thoughts, number one. Those thoughts do not belong to you. If the thoughts aren't healthy, if it's not around peace and a sound mind, love, nourishment, things like that, then those thoughts are not yours and they're harmful to your healing. So, being able to discern the difference between, are these thoughts designed to help me heal, or are these thoughts designed to put me in a very unhealthy space mentally, physically, and beyond? Because even with your question, there are levels to healing. There's a physical level, there's a mental level, there's an emotional level, and even your soul sometimes
Yeah.
needs to heal too,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? So, emotionally, it definitely took some years, to be honest, because I was a young woman, a child at that. And unfortunately, I am not the only human being that's experienced this, a shooting. This unfortunately happens to men and women all the time. It has nothing to do with color. Someone doesn't have to do a crime to get, shot, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it happens in the most what we think are the safest places.
Right.
So
Right.
the emotional aspect of just processing what happened, and then just kind of like the domino effect of people wanting to know, like, are you okay? Are you really okay? And, are you saying okay just to say it? Or if you're not okay, are you able to even articulate
Right.
what it means to not be okay? So just even the mental aspect of just processing all of that
Mhm.
emotionally, that's something that can trigger someone to shut down, which
Right.
I definitely had those moments.
Yeah.
And, also the trust when it comes to the healing. Do you trust someone to confide in them about what you're mentally, emotionally processing? And then is that someone safe, right, to even lay out those areas, which again, as a child, as a teenager at the time too, that's my second year of being a teenager at the time. So I'm still, in a personal development aspect within that and trying to explain to other children, things that I don't, even as an adult, I couldn't really understand was challenging to a certain extent
Yeah. Yeah.
because it kind of shows you who does and does not support you. And
Mhm.
even the people that may not support, either they may not understand, they don't want to, like there's different levels to that. So just the time and the unfolding, because life didn't stop when I experienced the shooting.
Yeah.
If anything, it got even deeper.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
ultimately, definitely took years because there were other trauma that kind of made me come back to thinking about this
Yeah.
and just how public it was. And I didn't really have the opportunity to privately heal
Mhm.
either. And I believe that is important to have a privacy in general,
Mhm.
even, if you're on a public statue, it's important to have privacy because we are humans, we're not robots.
Right.
We process things or are not even given the grace to process. And as a woman, I know that this is something that men have expressed to me has been a challenge for them to emotionally process trauma or things that maybe they don't understand, and just kind of like society pushing that narrative like, oh, just be strong and just not, and that's something that even with women being like nurturers too, nurturing and providing is on both sides. It just looks a little different. So coming from a Nigerian culture and background, we are very strong in our community on how we serve and things like that.
Right.
I know in general, as a society, we can do better with how we process trauma.
Yeah.
So that was something that even in that space, emotionally, as a woman, a young teenage woman, that was something that I had to understand this is not something that you heal overnight.
Right.
You have to give it time. You don't just say, hey, I'm going to heal by in the next 30 days. You have to really give yourself grace and time to process, and also understand that you're simultaneously still in your personal development
Yeah.
space.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter how old we are, personal development is applicable until we're removed from this
Right.
earth. And I learned from an emotional aspect that you do also have to process things emotionally
Mhm.
and in ways that is healthy for you. But when you do pay attention to those unhealthy thoughts, understand that that is not you. So
Yeah.
just separating just the negative and what harmful thoughts and conversations could do to your mind and
Right.
emotions.
Right.
I believe that once I grasp that aspect, it helped in my healing aspect
Yeah.
emotionally.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you got through high school okay after that? What happened
I
after
got
that?
through high school okay. I would say even sophomore year, it was a little bit of a challenge to come back because,
Yeah.
it happened the end of freshman year.
Freshman year.
So, there was just summertime and temporarily I was on house protection.
Yeah.
So it was just a lot of adjustment there.
Okay.
And with me, I don't ever feel comfortable just kind of being down or just not being my best because, again, not just as an athlete, but as someone that was so heavy in the community
Yeah. Absolutely.
and, activities and things like that, it kind of takes a toll on you when you're not able to perform the way you're used to. So it took time for sure.
Yeah.
It took time, but in high school, high school is high school,
Yeah.
right? Even if it didn't happen, there's a lot of ups and downs that can
Absolutely.
happen in high
Absolutely.
school. So
Yep.
adding that type of unique factor was
Mhm.
something that other children either supported or they didn't know how to support.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I did appreciate all the individuals, whether we were cool or did or didn't know each other, just them expressing, their support in whatever ways that they have at the time and over the years.
Yeah.
I did appreciate that because that is extremely traumatic and it
Yes.
can unfortunately take a toll if you're not careful. And then also the community that you have around you
Right.
to
Right.
support you absolutely could make or break how
Right.
the process of your healing takes place as well.
Very true. Very true.
Yes.
So after graduation of high school, what did you decide to do?
So from there, I actually attended Lincoln University,
Okay.
which is actually located in Oxford, Pennsylvania. I
Okay.
was there for a good amount of time. Initially, I was at the time studying psychology,
Okay.
and it's kind of interesting how that works because I was already operating in media and mass communications and
Oh, okay.
communications. So it wasn't until I got to college where, by the grace of God, in like elementary school and even prior to the shooting, I actually started, I wouldn't say my career, I'd say more of professional journey, really in school. So
Okay.
where the special needs, autism, child development
Yeah.
aspect, I actually began that very early. So I would go and volunteer at the elementary school that I attended. That's how I learned that there was a separation between children with special needs, autism, anything in that space
Mm.
versus the quote unquote normal kids.
Yeah. Right.
And I was not a fan of that as a child because I definitely asked, like, what does this mean? Because
Yeah.
it's very confusing,
Yeah.
even if adult tries to explain it, because everyone is special,
Yeah.
right? And everybody has somewhat of a disability, and not that a disability is something that they can't do all the things that they can do. But again, I believe it comes back to mindset and
Right.
then just the conditioning of what is being informed to that child or individual.
Agree.
So even in college, prior to that, I was already like practicing in the field that
Oh.
I wanted to more or less because I was again in sports and kind of media like type of things,
Right.
literature and
Yeah.
communications, but psychology, I wanted to understand why people think the way they think, the behavioral aspect, which I
Yeah.
was still involved.
Right.
So at the time, from elementary school to about college, I was already operating with agencies in healthcare,
Wow.
specializing in
Okay.
special needs. I did childcare development in high school and taught for about a year. Like it was a lot of things where with the type of community growing up in DC, Maryland, and Virginia,
Yeah.
but specifically in Maryland for me, but simultaneously all those areas at once. I'm very grateful the community that I was around. It was very hands-on, it was very, practitioner from the perspective where, you learn as a child the importance of family,
Right.
community, businesses, and people, like how all that
Yeah.
integrates together. So in that college aspect, I finally was getting to a place where I wanted to do psychology for so long because I really wanted to know the psyche and why humans
Yeah.
respond and think, etc. So I was very laser focused on that for a while, despite me being pretty diverse in what I
Yeah.
was doing anyway.
Right. Right.
But by the time I got to college, it was a very interesting experience. Obviously I was away from school.
Yeah.
Not that I didn't make friends. I did connect with people, but I was purposely very solo too because I knew I was coming to study. I knew I was coming to, not party and all these
Right.
things, but just, I knew I came for a purpose. So as it unfolded, I learned a lot. Everyone is not for you. Everyone is not always going to be supportive and things like that.
Right.
So even when I was taking classes in psychology, it's interesting because it's like my whole life I was ready to go to college and finally pursue
Yeah.
that, even though I was kind of technically doing that with mental health
Yeah.
and healthcare. But it's like once I got there and I started really, really studying from a college level of the psychology, it was weird because it just started to become a disconnect for me.
Oh, really?
I'm
Okay.
not really sure how to explain it, but
Yeah.
I guess the best way I would explain it is communications is what I thought psychology was.
Okay.
And that's a whole rabbit hole within itself.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Communications is powerful. What you speak matters.
Yeah.
You know, how you communicate matters. You can communicate, and I learned this with children with special needs too, and adults too, that I'm appreciative of. Observation is important because you communicate in so many ways: verbal, nonverbal,
Right.
body language, facial expression, even how you write a letter,
Mm.
how you send an email. There's so
Right.
many ways that you communicate that you really don't realize the power of it, but how
Mm.
you speak and the way you verbally communicate is one of the most powerful things that we do as human beings.
That's
So
true.
when I got to college and I was studying psychology, there were just certain things that when I got deeper and deeper into it, it just kind of triggered like a disconnect and it made me kind of rethink what I was doing. And communications wasn't far. I mean, it actually goes hand in hand with psychology too.
Right.
So I learned that communications is really the foundation of psychology.
Okay.
And it is powerful what you speak because it
Mhm.
has a direct connection to your mind.
Yep.
So, for example, if there's unhealthy thoughts that are triggering in your mind, the power of speaking against it, even if it's your mind,
Mhm.
is very powerful. So, college was interesting. There were some ups and downs, and I eventually came back to kind of like my hometown area.
Yeah.
Um, Maryland, Maryland, DC, Virginia. And January 26th in 2010, when I did return, I temporarily was supposed to go to a community college, which is the number one community college in the nation, which was called Montgomery College. I unfortunately experienced a sexual assault the first day of attending the school, and it
Mhm.
actually had a direct connection to the shooting 5 years before.
Okay.
So, again, with me sharing this, this is a testimony.
Yeah.
It's not something that, to the audience and those that are paying attention to this amazing program, this is something where I didn't have to be alive to speak about it. And that's not something that I take for granted.
Right.
And again, it's just happens to be a part of my story and I
Yeah.
believe designed to encourage others, including myself. So as traumatic as that was as well too, again, similar to things when I was going through the shooting, it taught me a lot about processing
Right.
versus dealing. Though I
Right.
think those are two
Difference. Yeah.
totally different
Right.
lanes. And our community teaches us or conditions us to just deal with or just like, oh,
Mhm.
you're an adult or this happens to
Yeah.
everybody or things that basically your healing process is being dismissed to the left and you just have to just be strong
Yeah.
moving forward or just operate in the lifestyle of victimhood, which I'm not a fan of that at all
Right. Right.
because
Right.
that's just not our strength and the authority that was given to us. So, um the sexual assault experience was a whole nother level of trauma than the
Mhm.
shooting. And then just learning the political aspects of just schools, right? That should be designed to support you, make
Yeah.
sure that the students and staff are safe at all times. You learn
Yes.
the politics behind that too. I'll just say that. So, um, even to where I am now, the blessing behind both of them is it did not stop the purpose that I still have the opportunity to fulfill.
Right.
So that's really what
Wow.
I would say has encouraged me when I even speak about those type of
Right.
experiences today,
Yeah.
that as long as you're still alive and you
Mhm.
understand that God put you on his earth to be fruitful, multiply, and replenish and love on his people and
Mhm.
just serve, then there's no such thing as limitation.
Um,
We limit ourselves by our thoughts that
right.
we decide to accept,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
And we also, if we're not careful, may limit ourselves by how we speak.
Yeah.
So through that transition of transitioning from psychology to communications, which
Mhm.
even after the sexual assault, I did do that. And
Okay.
I'm grateful I did because there's still aspects that do cover somewhat of psychology, but communications takes it to a whole nother level.
Yeah.
And it's not just about production and, being on TV and stuff like that. Communications has to do with everyday living. You
Mhm.
know, everything is communicating. Nature communicates, you know, architect communicates, right? People do, even animals do in their own way.
Yeah,
Children do. So communication is extremely powerful when you understand the value of that and the value within you
yeah,
of how you can leverage there. So definitely as college progressed, and even transitioning me back into my home region, there were definitely some ups and downs with the challenges of the two events that I mentioned, but it really did still encourage me to serve people, businesses, communities, and make sure that healing is something that is a priority and not just on your to-do list to fit in the lifestyle that
yeah,
you have.
absolutely. So taking that resilience of what you learned from those two events, how do you carry that into your professional life, and how did that decide, like, what are you doing now that that is maybe the reason why you're doing it is because of what happened to you. So what are you doing now?
So great question. So currently I am running my client acquisition media digital marketing solutions company, or agency here in Washington, D.C. It is called the Lady E Effect, as you all see, and we basically specialize in those client acquisition, all-inclusive internet services, to service-based providers. We are a B2B and also business to government agency in Washington, D.C. But in regards to your question, how that relates is the foundation of our business comes back to just the biblical aspect of being fruitful, multiplying, and replenishing the earth. And media and marketing have everything to do with business from a personal development to a business aspect because we're putting on display, you know, people's stories,
Yeah.
right? The story of the companies,
Right.
you know, the background of what led the founders to, you know, create, you know, what they did. And creation is very powerful and something that was even given to us as human beings to
Right.
produce. So even the trauma aspect of media, and just the aspect of us leveraging through the internet with our clientele.
Yeah.
We know broadcasting level and we understand how powerful it is and can be, but the politics that come behind that, where people are not able to be as vocal as they would like to be.
Yeah.
But that's the beautiful nature of the internet. You're able to take back your power and your authority. And, you know, from a podcast level, YouTube level, social media, or just
Yeah.
areas that it's like you can own it versus being controlled by, you know, another party.
Yeah.
We're very intentional about that. And just even the foundation of our company, you know, it really comes back to, you know, I'm a biblical believer.
Mhm.
I thank God for just giving me the aspect to be on his earth and just, you know, do all the things that, you know, we're required to do in a beautiful blossom harvest type of way. So even the Lady E effect, it comes back to personal development, business solutions, and community transformation. So it's beyond the media and marketing. We know the power of people and
Mhm.
how that leads to businesses and how that leads to the improvement, which is the transformation of communities. So all the experiences of life, whether they were traumatic or designed to help me grow,
Mhm.
taking those aspects and transitioning into my business, which I come from a family of business owners, entrepreneurs, doctors, lawyers, engineers, but just all different fashions. But specifically from my grandparents to my parents operating in business and just at a young age, witnessing what they did to the community, I knew that was absolutely a part of my blueprint.
Yeah.
And I love contributing to people finishing the race, right? You know, I kind of use the athletic term because being an athlete, not just in track and field, but just all different sports, it really just put a lot in perspective, teaching you about endurance, like you said, just being resilient, you know, the bravery of understanding that even if something happens to you, it's not who you are. It happens to be a part of your story. And don't let it take you down. You
That's
know, you have authority to stand tall, stand firm,
yeah.
speak when need to, have the discernment and wisdom and knowledge and understanding that's given to you. And understand your worth, understand your anointing, you know? So all of those different areas are what really brought me into the business I am, especially me as a woman understanding that getting shot or raped or sexually assaulted does not happen to women alone. This happens to men
Mhm.
all the time. And that is even from the mental behavioral side of my business. You know, we believe in the importance of men, their mental health. We believe in the importance of women and their mental health and children. Like all three of those absolutely matter. And as a woman, I know that for the men first. I didn't grow up with my father. My father was deceased a little bit after I was born, but just even my grandfather before he passed, prior to me approaching 8 years old, just seeing men doing things that they, let me not say are supposed to do, yes, biblically, but also, you know, wanting to serve the community,
Right, right.
wanting to help people, right? And passionate about that. That's something that I've always been passionate about too. I haven't gone through everything that everyone else has, and they haven't with me either. So we
Right.
can learn from each other,
Absolutely.
not to trauma bond, because that's another thing I've learned too, being careful of the fine lines of trauma bonding versus like learning how to process trauma together and
Absolutely.
not, you know, picking that up as your personality if I were to articulate it in that fashion.
Very good point.
But yeah, it's definitely something that in operating in my business now, I'm very blessed and grateful to be here and, you know, share my story, not just on your amazing platform, but just in general, just having maybe a simple conversation with a stranger. We are powerful human beings when we understand that we have purpose to fulfill. And
Absolutely.
when we look at life from that perspective, then we don't get too caught up on the distractions of life that are really designed to kind of cripple our minds to feel like we're limited.
Yeah, derail us. Well,
Yes.
Edith, the audience certainly has captured the essence of Edith Nwosu. How'd I do that?
Yes.
Did I do
Yes.
that right? And the
Yes.
Lady E
Perfect.
Effect. Um, Folks, you're going to want to get in touch with Edith. Okay, so I am going to look at this. Website, theladyeeffect.com. And you could also call the number 202-417-8046. So two easy ways to get in touch with Edith uh, on her website. Two final questions. All right.
Sure.
I'm going to give you the opportunity to use your imagination. You're sitting down with young 7 to 10-year-old Edith, and you want to give her advice about life. What are you going to tell her?
That's a wonderful question. So I would tell this version of Edith that number one, understand that God loves you. We love him because he first loved us. That's what the Bible says.
Mhm.
Number two, I would encourage her about the importance of having faith and knowing that you have purpose.
Mhm.
And the last thing I would say to her is do it. How Nike says, just do it.
Yeah.
You know, it's not perfect how you do it, but understand that no one else is gonna fulfill those shoes for
Right.
your purpose. So I would tell her just do it.
I love that. All right, so switch gears. Now you're sitting down with young Edith, the young businesswoman, young entrepreneur, and you want to give her advice about business. What are you going to tell her?
Beautiful question. So, what I would say to her is number one, business is biblical. And that's a whole nother conversation. I would love to come back if need be for that. We were put on this earth to be fruitful. We were put on this earth to multiply. We were put on this earth to replenish. So, whether you're a farmer, an architect, a consultant, a coach, a teacher, we are here to love one another. So even through business, there's a whole ministry lane of how you can be able to serve people. And it really starts with having faith in God. That's the first thing I would say with her. There's nothing that you cannot do. You can do all things through Christ, but you have to have faith and understand your authority first.
Right.
And from there, when you understand that you have purpose, then you understand your purpose is bigger than you,
Hmm.
and it's actually generations to come. So, as we were given a baton, generationally to leave a legacy that's designed to not harm the world, but to harvest it,
Hmm.
then you understand what business is about. It's bigger than you. It's about the earth that you are accountable for in terms of contributing for the betterment of it. And when you understand ultimately also with business too, you are designed to solve problems. That's how you build wealth. You're solving problems
Mhm.
of, people that may not even be able to understand what their problems are. The power of observation too, is important. And last but not least, just the aspect of just understanding that even as you build wealth, this is a beautiful biblical hack, I would say, but also a principle in the Bible. Make sure that whatever you do as you serve the community, give to the poor.
Mhm.
Give to the poor, give to those that cannot give back to you. You don't understand how many blessings don't just come to you, but go to them and other people that you're connected to. So give, and give to someone that may not be able to say anything but thank you.
Right.
And you will see in the future how powerful that is.
I love that's wonderful advice. Edith, thank you for coming on the show and thanks for coming into my life. Continue to be the wonderful human being you are. You're doing wonderful things for people. And thank you for being vulnerable and telling your story because somebody out there, it's going to resonate and it's going to help them.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be on your platform. And please, you continue to be a blessing to others. It's definitely been an honor to be on your platform today.
It's my pleasure to have you, Edith.
Yeah,
Everybody out there, please take care of yourselves. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe and give us a review to help others find it. I'd like you to answer this question. Are you living the life you want to live, or are you living the life others want you to live? I'd like you to think about that for a second, because I strongly suggest you live the life you want to live. If you want to learn more about what I stand for and my services and how I'm able to help many men get out of their own way, please go to my website at www.profitcompassion.com. Feel free to also email me at drew@profitcompassion.com. I'd love to have a conversation with you. Take care of yourself and choose to write your own story instead of letting others write it for you.